الأطياف وانهب له وانثور. هذا رسول الله من يطمع بقربه يشمر اليمنى ويرد عنه شرور.
To proceed, brothers and sisters, friends, relatives, I greet you the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Today we're talking about the purpose of life. You know, in the 21st century context, this doesn't mean much anymore, does it? I mean, let's really think about it. Let's think about what does it mean to have a purpose? Because sometimes when we flow through life and we just react to life's obstacles and circumstances, we don't even really reflect, scratch the surface, try to comprehend, understand, or even take note of the fact that what does it mean to have a purpose? Because I think it's very important to sometimes to take a snapshot of yourself and say, okay, why am I doing this? For whom am I doing this? And why am I doing this? This is very important because if we don't start to have the mentality of critical thinking and scratching the surface and asking the next question, then this whole talk is irrelevant. Forget it. I'm not in the business of medicine, so I don't want this talk, lecture, presentation, advice, whatever you want to call it, to be another dosage of your intellectual and spiritual insulin. Because we all suffer from some form of intellectual spiritual diabetes. You know, you were at King's today, you had a very boring lecturer, and you thought, I'll come today and maybe be inspired. That's fine. That's good. We all need that sometimes. But I really see my role as just a normal human being who is under you, who is basically a fraud, if you think about it, because there are so many more qualified Muslims that should be here and should be speaking. Now, I'm just a normal human being that just wants to make you think, and I want us to have a conversation. I don't want this to be just full of sophistry, which is rhetoric without substance, but rather a bit of rhetoric with substance. Okay, so I want us to have a conversation for us to try and see these ideas for what they are. And it's very important because out of my own frustrations, I go to various universities and discuss these topics at length with Muslims and non-Muslims and those in the middle. We have these various discussions, and sometimes you just can't penetrate this veil that's there. You can't penetrate this kind of physical wall almost, and as if you're speaking in a different language like Chinese, yeah? And I think one of the reasons for that is because we don't ask the very first questions that I'm talking about now, which is, what does it mean? That's a very important point. We should always have that in our minds, meaning, what does it mean? Because sometimes we just take things for granted. Okay, purpose of life, there you go. Oh yeah, I'm a Muslim. Yep, I'm a non-Muslim, I'm an agnostic, I'm an atheist. All of these categorizations and labels and boxes and these tick boxes. I mean, life has become just one big tick box, hasn't it, yeah? So the point is, we need to ask the question, what does it mean? And from my perspective as a Muslim, obviously we believe in the Qur'an, you heard the verse of the Qur'an, the raison d'etre, the reason for existence for the Quranic discourse is to wake you up with that type of thinking. It's actually to make you realize that I need to start thinking about, what does it mean? What are the implications? And this is so critical, and you know, it is frustrating seeing Muslim students and non-Muslim students who may be academic, they may be bright, you know, they may know the math, the geography, the geology, the astronomy, the physics, whatever the case may be, but frankly, without being offensive, they're stupid. And I'll tell you why, what I mean by that. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, because I'm stupid too. But I realize that I'm stupid, so that makes me a little bit more of a better stupid than any other type of stupid, yeah? And let me explain. It's because we seldom ask the question about the implications of things. And the Quranic discourse always tells you to think and reflect. For example, the Qur'an says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not use your intellect, your aql, your intellect? Which, by the way, we have the famous scholars of Islam, like the 11th century theologian Al-Ghazali, talking about the role of the mind. We have Ibn Taymiyyah, who spoke about the aql, and that you have to have a sound intellect in order to understand reality. And this has come from the Qur'an. It's not a historical accident. This is why the Qur'an says, وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do we explain our signs and evidences for those who reflect. Now interestingly, the word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ comes from the Arabic triliteral stem fa, ka, ra. Now if you look at the classical dictionaries, this is quite a deep word. It doesn't mean any type of thinking. Being a desert romantic, sitting back on the deck chair, touching the sand, writing poetry to your beloved, looking at the stars, and sipping on a glass of milk. Just to make it Islamic, of course. But the point is, it's about the thing that you're reflecting upon. You must inquire deeply about its implications. Deeply. What does it mean to have a consciousness? That a conscious reality emerged from non-conscious reality. These are important questions. These are very significant questions. We have to think about this. This is why the Qur'an even directs us to this. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect, ponder within the inner dimensions, the inner reality? And this is the type of people we must be, because frankly, the Qur'an is not the book of the Muslims. It's not the book of the Jews, not the book of the Christians. It's the book of Richard Dawkins. It's the book of Sam Harris, Dan Dennett, all the atheists and the non-theists and the religious people. It's for everybody, because it's a product of the divine reality that came to inspire you, to make you think. And we need to be this type of thinking people, because the whole question, purpose of life, I could sit here and tell you what the purpose of life is, but it's nothing. It's like giving someone who's already full some food. It won't make no difference to you. Sorry, mate. I've had dinner. Because at the moment, we think we're full, isn't it? Spiritually, intellectually. Because we live our lives with so many distractions. So many distractions. Even education can be a distraction. You know? Running off of some crazy theorem that's going to make a difference to a rat. Yeah? Or something insignificant. You know, those are insignificant things. Don't get me wrong, we need to do it. We need to be consumers. We live in a capitalist society. We have to get a good job, get a master's, get some money, get married, and then die. So we have to do all of those things, right? You know, the rat race. But the reason I'm really focusing on this today is because if you go out of this room by learning to think the next step, job done. Job done. Because I really believe if someone's sincere and they have the intellectual capacity and they have the tools required to investigate this question, then you don't need a talk. You don't need YouTube. You don't need reference books. You don't need anything. You just simply need yourself. Because in the Islamic spiritual tradition, we believe in the fitrah. The fitrah means the innate disposition, which comes from the triliteral stem fa-ta-ra. So you have words like fatrun and fatarahu, which means something was created within you to acknowledge the divine reality, your purpose, and that the divine reality is the only being worthy of worship. So, thinking is critical. So we really need to start to think. And sometimes the only way to do that is talk about examples. How can you make someone think? It's not easy. That you think, but how do you really think? That's not a paradox. It's an important question. And I think I want to give you some examples. And let me just give you a few concerning human interpersonal relationships, okay? Human beings, for example, we live in two types of realities, okay? I'm going to draw them as circles. This is the first reality, and this is the second one. This is what I would like to call your drama. And this is your reality. And here's an arrow, okay? think they're the same. This is an exercise in thinking. A conscious awareness of the self. It's very important. We live in a drama which we think is reality. And we think they're the same. Because human beings take our limited perspectives, based on experience, based on parental interaction, based on our limited thoughts, our limited ideas. It could even be from religion, from the social construct, from society, from the priesthood, from the scientists, from anybody, from these type of people, all of our experiences, and we superimpose it on reality. And we think our drama is reality. We're living in EastEnders. Honestly, or Home and Away. Do you remember that? That's old school, man. So the point is, and we have to learn how to divorce drama from reality. And it's so hard to do that. Do you know why? Because the nafs in the Islamic spiritual tradition is called the ego. And oh dear, it doesn't want you to know reality. It wants you to stay into this drama. Because what's the nature of the nafs? And this is a universal phenomenon. This is not just based on Islam. Think about the ego, the concept of the ego. What does the ego want to do? It always wants to be right. It never wants to be wrong. It always wants to impose itself. And it never wants to be imposed upon. That's the reality of the ego. And we have to learn how to consciously, by thinking, divorce drama from reality. And let me give you an example to highlight what I'm trying to say. I used to be a project manager just down the road here. New King's Beam House, the 9th floor, the police IT organization has been disbanded now. My office was facing St. Paul's Cathedral, right on the river. Just right here. You know, when I come here, it's nostalgic, yeah? And I used to be a program office manager, and I used to love tea, because one of my heroes was Bruce Lee. Yeah? I know that rhymes, but I didn't mean to. And Bruce Lee used to love different types of tea. Rose Putong. You know what rose Putong is? It's basically tea roasted over rose petals. Okay, so I used to love lots of tea, so I used to have tea all the time. So I walked to the kitchenette area and want to get some tea, okay? And I saw my two friends, John and Paul. John and Paul. And every time I approach, they'll be whispering. I come closer, they stop whispering. I'm thinking, look, I'm a nice guy. I don't have low self-esteem. I have good parenting. You know? No problem. I go back again. John and Paul. Whispering. What happens? They stop when I approach. Now this happens 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and I'm starting to get paranoid. I mean, some of you get paranoid the first hour, yeah? Depends where you're from in the globe. And that's not a stereotype. I mean, I don't make up stereotypes, yeah? I just observe them. So, and I'm like getting frustrated. I'm like, you know what? I know they're trying to backstab me. Yeah? That's the reality of the rat race of capitalism. They knew that I just got promoted. And I remember when I was speaking to Paul in the pub, his face changed. When I said I got a promotion and I got more money. And then he looked at me and I could see that thing in his throat like, oh, well done, Andreas. That's really good. And I'm like, you know, when I speak to John, he used to be my gym mate, and he always wanted to take more weights than me, and he would be more competitive, and he brought that into the working environment because he took my girlfriend, yeah? And then I'm creating this big narrative in my mind every morning on the way to Starbucks just before I go to work. I'm thinking, this has been my whole life. When I was 7 years old in primary school, that little girl would never speak to me. They want to play with me. I want to be the leader of the Ghostbusters gang. Yeah? And my dad would always say to me that I'm not going to be a nobody. Do you see what I'm doing? My drama. So on that Monday, I have a meeting with my line manager. And my line manager says to me, you've called this important meeting. I said, yes. Those two guys, I think they're racist. Yeah? They're racist. You know, how many times do I have to say I'm Greek, I'm not Pakistani? Yeah? How many times do I have to say that? And not just this, the guy's jealous, I got proof about his face in the pub, they're trying to backstab me, then the line manager gets a bit upset, I go crazy, bang the table, I get sacked. I lose my job, man. So what do? I have my box, I go home, say, Mom, Dad, I lost my job. And then a few days after, I receive an email from John and Paul, and what do they say? Andreas, we were just planning your birthday party, man. My drama, superimposing on reality. By the way, that's not a true story. But this is our lives. I'm telling you, I'll give you 100 stories like this. It's our lives, I'm telling you. It is our lives. And if you really learn to consciously take a snapshot of yourself and understand that what you're doing, you're imposing your drama on reality, I'm telling you, you will be able to connect with human beings that you've never connected before. Let me give you an example. Who has hugged the EDO before? The EDO. Do you know who the EDO are? The English Defence League. Has anyone hugged them before? Nobody, yeah? No one. I have. I've hugged them before. It's on YouTube. I've hugged the EDO before. I'm not saying I'm perfect. But I learned to break down my drama, some of it, especially when you're connecting with people that really hate you. And the EDO hugged me. They started off by coming right to my face and saying, "You want shit Sharia law?" Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm interacting with them and I'm breaking them down. I'm not superimposing my tendencies, my drama. Oh, they're racist, they want to fight me, they want to bite me, they want to kill me, they want to do all this to me. I'm like treating them as a blank canvas. And then we hug at the end. Because I empathize with them. I'm telling you, if you can't empathize with the EDO, you're not a human being. What a radical statement from a Muslim, huh? If you can't empathize with the EDO, even if you're Muslim or non-Muslim, you're not a human being. Why? Why not? Because you need to understand what their reality is. They're a product of a specific social process. They're a product. If you had exactly the same social variables, you may be exactly the same type of person as an EDO. And when it comes from a Muslim community perspective, some of the Muslim community is far more racist than EDL anyway. There's more racism in some Muslim communities, which is not Islam, by the way, than the EDL. You know, Punjabi can't marry Kashmiri, Bengali can't marry Pakistani, Pakistani can't marry Indian, an Indian can't marry an Arab can't marry a black can't marry an Afghani can't even marry an Afghani. Yeah? The point is, we have these issues, right? And it's because we don't understand, we don't introspect, and we superimpose our drama on the reality. And you're going to be thinking, Hamza, you're politically naive. Hamza, whose side are you on? And you know whose side am I on? I'm on the side of the truth. And if you're on the side of the truth, you're on the side of Allah, God. Because what's his name in the Islamic tradition? Al-Haq, the truth. So, when you're always on the side of the truth, then you're always going to be on the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Glorified be Him. I'm telling you, you take this away as homework, you'll find out what dramas you have in your life. It will change everything. I did this in Manchester as a course. I had so many brothers and sisters coming up to me and crying and saying, I thought my mum never loved me because she always went to Pakistan to take care of her dad who was ill. And she was always away from the house, but I just realized that she sacrificed everything for her dad because he was unwell and she always took care of me. And I'm going to call her today and say I love her for the first time in 10 years. Oh, your life though, yeah? We have these issues, I'm telling you. And it could be with our own selves. Sometimes we put ourselves down. We're thinking, you know, I don't have the ability. I don't know, I can't. I don't. We have this sense of low self-esteem and negativity, right? And that's because we're stuck in this drama. And it's usually based upon one experience in our life that has become the lenses in which we see the world. I'm telling you. And every experience we have, we see through the same lenses. We say, see, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. Because you're always carrying the same lenses, right? And that's why two different experiences, two different people will see them in totally different ways. Why? They got two different lenses. That shapes their reality. So, this is an art of trying to think. Because sometimes it's so hard to think like this. Because sometimes we think, you know what? My interpretations and perspectives of reality are true. There's no such thing as my drama. It's not external to truth. It is the truth. And that's the nature of the ego, isn't it? So hopefully you're taking a lesson so you could apply this in your own life. And I'm telling you, you'll be able to connect with people in so many ways that you never connected with before. Let me give you another example. Let's do a test, social test. Here's a word, okay? What does that say? Atheist. Atheist. Now, be brave. Put your hand up. What comes to mind? Feelings, emotions. Yes?
Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins. Good. Come on. Don't lie.
Stalin.
Stalin. Ooh. Warming up. Come on. Monkeys. Who said that? Was that you? Was that you? Okay, monkeys. Anything else? Okay, let me tell you when I've done this with Muslims before what I heard. Fuel for the hellfire. Cold. Reductionist. Abstract. Rejecting the truth. Backward. Stupid. Morons. Yeah? Good. Now, let me give you another word. Give me some labels. Labels, people. Honest? We're in the wrong century, love. I want you to think like a non-Muslim, by the way.
Yeah.
That's it. Bring it out. Terrorist. Anything else? Heaven. Ninja. Always late. Oppressed. Come on. Smelly.
Okay.
Anything else? Wife beaters.
Backward.
Backward.
Impulsive.
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 Impulsive. Yeah? Late Asia. Asian.
Yeah.
Dirty. Angry.
He's London Mosque.
You guys are self-haters, man. Far more comments for Muslims than for the atheists. You guys putting things correct or something? Okay, good. Now, who feels ashamed now? Come on, let's get that thinking going. You did to the atheist what the non-Muslims do to the Muslims. Don't you guys have a pugnacious attitude? Look at the way you judge the atheist. But you know that we get the same kind of criticisms. So the thing that you disagree with, you actually are. So the problem is not other people, the problem is you. Do you understand this point? People criticize the Muslims in that particular way. You took the same kind of drama and you did exactly the same thing with the atheist. So now you know no one is the problem apart from your own self. It doesn't sound nice, does it? It's not a healthy thing not a healthy space. But it's the beginning. So when you're talking to, for example, I introduce you to John. Do you hear John? Speak to the crowd. By the way, John is the head of the Atheist Society. What will come to mind? Who will you be interacting with? John or your drama? Your drama. You'll be thinking he's atheist, he's cold, reductionist, fuel for the hellfire, this, that, and the other, and you're not engaging with John in the way John should be engaged with. You're engaging with your drama. And that's what happens when some non-Muslims attack Muslims. They're not engaging with the Muslim, they're engaging with their dramas as well, based on media, their limited interpretations, etc. And even their limited experiences. So the way to break this is to understand that. And from a Muslim perspective, to understand the Sunnah, which is the way of the Prophet Muhammad upon him be peace. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when I see someone new, don't tell me anything about them. He said that to his Sahaba, to his companions. So when he engaged with people, he engaged with them how they should be engaged with, not based on the drama. And you may think, how does this relate to the purpose of life? Well, it does actually, in such a huge way, because it makes you think. It makes you subconsciously be aware of your current drama and narrative. And whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, or whoever you are, if you don't really get this right, you won't really fulfill your purpose of life, in my humble opinion. You won't find it. Because how could you? Imagine you're a Christian, and being Christian is part of your drama too, right? It's part of your limited experiences. If you're always superimposing it on viewing the Islamic way of life, without taking a snapshot of yourself and saying, look, this is still my limited interpretation, let me have a blank canvas, let me create a new realm of possibility for myself. If you don't do that, then you just stay the same. This is why, from a spiritual perspective, Islamically, we say that we are given windows of opportunities in our lives, that the door of life opens and we're invited home. And that could be someone's death. That could be a loss of a job, loss of a sibling, loss of a family member, depression, illness, some form of wake-up call. And these are spiritual windows. And they're windows of opportunity for us to reflect and enter into. Because if you really think about it, when we have these spiritual windows, our drama doesn't mean anything anymore. I'll give you an example. Who doesn't like their brother? You don't like your brother, right? That's sad, but that's life, yeah? What's your name, if you don't mind? Jasmine. Yasmin. You don't like your brother, right? Okay. If you got a phone call now and you find out your brother died, how important will those feelings be?
Not very important.
Exactly. So what does it say about your feelings?
They're not really existent.
Yeah, they're not that important, are they? Because it's the ego, isn't it? I'm telling you, every time I wanted to break someone's face open, yeah, like in the family, you get so angry, sort of like, oh, what are you doing? Yeah, not that word. I just think of them in their grave. And it just stops. The ego just breaks. It's like, you know what, we're all going to be one buffet. We're going to die. We're going to interact and have party with the worms and the rats and the slugs. You know, there are far more greater priorities. And when we do this with our lives all the time, we see, then what is the greatest priority for our lives then? And I would argue, it's actually to find out who the hell you are, and why you are, and whose you are. And obviously your students on a Friday night, sometimes you'll be saying where you are. Yeah? But the point is, this is why we have to have ultimate objectives in life to make meaning of our own lives. Because the whole question of purpose is so important. Now some people say, I'm an atheist, I don't need purpose in life, I make my own purpose. That's fair enough. But I think that kind of person still has their own drama. They're deluded. Because if you break it down to reality, if you don't have an ultimate purpose, there is no ultimate value, no ultimate meaning, and I would say not even ultimate morality. Take morality as an example. And if you read Nietzsche was a phenomenal man. But a lot of people, they used to accuse him of being a nihilist. He wasn't a nihilist at all. Nietzsche was a moral philosopher. But everyone's accusing him of being nihilistic and might is right. If you've got the power, then you could dictate what is good and bad. But he made a very prophetic statement. And that's why I respect him. I take my intellectual hat for him, yeah? Nietzsche, and this is according to Professor Jeans from Birkbeck University. He's an amazing scholar of Nietzsche. I think he sees him in the correct light. Nietzsche, for example, he acknowledged something profound. He said, European society is going to realize once you have rejected the divine, you know his famous statement, God is dead? Once you reject the divine realities outside of your sphere, outside of your social reality, outside of your personhood, outside of your sense of self and sense of who you are, then everything is meaningless. everything. Because everything then will be only subject and relative. It will be subject to your perspective and relative to your experiences and limited understanding. There is going to be no objective way. And he said that people are going to be going through this kind of process thinking, no, there is still objective morality. That's why you have things like the Humanist Association of Britain coming up, and of Sydney and in America, and they're like almost pseudo-religious entities trying to hold on human value and make it real, make it transcend humanity. But in reality, it's still subject to them and relative to their perspective. And Nietzsche said, when Europe, in 200 years, he said, would realize that there is no meaning, it's meaningless, we will have to make our own selves God. And he realized a big problem with this. He said, in making ourselves God, then there will be the battle of the gods. Because you could be different from me. Your morals, your meaning, could not align with my morals or meaning. And that's why sometimes he would say, might is right. But he would also say profoundly, I have my values, where are yours? And I think Nietzsche hit the nail on the head. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you take God out of the picture, there is no ultimate meaning and no ultimate moral value. Zero! Finished! Then you may, oh, but it's wrong and it's bad and it's evil. Yeah, says who? Says who? Like my dad says he always says to me, my mom says something, this is sinful. My mom says, yeah, I leave some food on my plate. And my dad would say, in which book is that written? Yeah? He says as a rhetorical joke to show, like, well, show me your basis for it. Is it just you, your own perspective? So when there is no transcendent being or transcendent conceptual anchor that's independent from human subjectivity, then it's going to be might is right. And I'm telling you, we see this today, but we don't even see it. Might is right is happening today. It is happening today. Moral values are being shaped by those who have power in society. Study psychology. Who studies psychology? Social constructionism. Read it up. Vivian Burr. Her book is called Social Constructionism, published by Routledge. She makes a profound point. She says, you think your dispositions and your emotions and your humanisms and all these isms and schisms and right and wrong and moral values and pointing the finger and all this rubbish, you think it transcends you. But that's rubbish. You're just a product, you're a slave of society. Because in social constructionism, the influentials in a particular society are structured in such a way to shape us and shape our disposition. I'm telling you, it happens. We've seen this. Look at 15 years ago. Would MTV show what MTV is showing today? No. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it would be called a porno channel, right? Almost. You see some of these rap stars in their videos, it's atrocious. And the social construct has changed our perspective, has changed our intuition. Because the reason human beings are easily affected by society is because of what you call the development of the social construct or the development of the social norm. And this happens via two processes: informational social influence and normative social influence. And basically, what does this mean? It basically means that human beings want certainty. It's a drive. We want to be certain. We don't want to be unsure about ourselves and what we believe in and our values and our perspective and our moral compass. We want to know we're heading the right direction. But when we're uncertain, we go to the collective because it's like almost a semantic substitute for the divine will. Because so many other people are saying it, therefore it must be right. So when these constructs are influential in society, the media, the politicians, the scientists, or whatever the case may be, when they say something and you are uncertain, you'll agree with them. And that shifts social opinion. And you're all product of it. I'm telling you, if I were to even have a meeting with you for an hour, I'll probably find out that we're all individualistic. We have a sense of individualism inside us. Because if I were to ask you, do you know your first, second, or third neighbor really well? Most of you would probably say, I don't know nothing about them. But if you were to ask that question in the 1930s, the whole neighborhood was a family. Look where society has taken hold of you. It's terrible. And you don't even know it. You don't even care about Joe Blogs next door. Who the hell is he? What's in it for me? I'm alright, Jack. As long as I'm paying my bills. As long as I'm alright. Who cares about him? Just what? 70 years? The social construct has destroyed us because of this rat race of consumerism and thinking that consumerism and materialism is going to define who we are. This is why the riots happen. You know the recent riots, the England riots? One major thesis that was proposed why the English riots happened is because of austerity measures, the working class had less money. But because of this avid materialism we have in society, you know, the bling bling, 50 cent, the irony, 50 cent and he's worth big millions, yeah? By the way, he's an immoral idiot. I'm on his Twitter page. He's disgusting. It's pornographic. Even Mayweather, who knows Mayweather? Boxer, he's one of the most famous boxers. I respect him for his skill, but he's an immoral idiot. I said that to him. Not in those words, of course. But I said to him, you know, I tweeted him and I said, if you spend your time with all the influence, he's got millions of people on his Twitter page saying something positive and good, but what is he? Was it Money Team? That's his money team, make money. I want to be the richest in the world. Continuously, that's all he's about. And these are the influences in our society from a celebrity perspective. And this avid materialism is showing to people when you don't have an absolute and ultimate purpose of life, you're going to go into the norm. And what's the norm? What I look like and what I wear and the things that I own. That defines me. So in austerity measures, you don't have that anymore. So what are the working class going to do? They're going to try and find their sense of self, which is what? The material. So they'll steal it. These are all profound questions that you need to be thinking about, people. So, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that we're all really slaves. Every single one of us is in a state of slavery. It doesn't matter how you dress and what style you have and how many times you bench. Or whatever you do in life. At the end of the day, we are in a form of slavery. I know we're brought up in the West to think that we're free. But frankly, I think this is utter bakwas. Which means rubbish. You know, the buck of the chickens, they don't know, or the birds. This is buck, yeah? Let me tell you why. And think of it from an existential perspective, not a social, oh, I'm a liberal, I think we're free. Take your ideology and leave it on the doorstep, yeah? I'm talking about reality. Existential reality is what it means to exist. Now, an American writer once wrote that your birth, my birth, our births is like being born and then kidnapped and sold into slavery. Rocky, did you choose your parenthood? Your parenting? Did you choose your parents?
No.
Did you choose your background?
No.
Where are you from again? Vietnamese?
China.
China. Did you choose you're going to be Chinese?
No.
Ni hao ma? Ni hen piao lian?
Oh, thank you.
No worries. I said he's very pretty. So, he didn't choose that he was going to be Chinese. He didn't choose his parents. He didn't even choose that he was going to be a bloke. You never chose that you're going to be Arab. I'm assuming you're Arab, right? Persian?
Not Persian.
Okay, gorgeous, yeah? He never chose that he was going to be gorgeous. He had no choice in that. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Yeah? You never chose you're going to be a woman. Yasmin, did you choose your name? You didn't, did you? You didn't choose where you're from. You had no choice in these things. Absolutely zero. And then you claim you're free. They have a sense of liberty. You know, actually it's worse than this, by the way. Not only did you didn't choose this context, but you didn't even choose your societal background, your social, political upbringing, your geography. You had no choice in this. You're enslaved to these things. And if you don't think, you're also enslaved to just your instincts, your drives, the carnal, bestial aspects of man. And we see many human beings like this. Go on the tube. Look at people's lives. Look at the average John Doe or Joe Blogs. What does he do? He wakes up, has the same old sani, same old coffee, has a couple of fags. He knows it's 3 fags, takes him to the bus stop. You know, he even knows how many fags he's going to have on the way. Gets on the bus, gets to work, a slave to his boss, 9 to 5, like a chicken hatching eggs. Yeah? finish his work, go to the pub, have a couple of pints, maybe watch this movie, that movie, he's all the bloody same, goes back home, looks for a bird, can't find one, and that's it. And then ends up with some woman he probably doesn't even love, has about 3 kids, they don't listen to him, he wastes all his money, then he gets arthritis and cancer, gets sent to an old person's home, and he dies. Congratulations. That's like an animal. You're just reacting to your instinct. And especially in capitalist society, they use the instincts and exasperate them to make you just keep on following your instincts. And I could guarantee that's the case. Study social constructionism and you would see. Look at the way they advertise credit cards and the new car and the things that we love and materialism. It's like an agitation of instinct. You see, even the sexual instinct has been used to sell things. Dog food, pretty woman. I don't know what they're trying to say. Are women like dogs or dogs like women? Or if you buy this food, are you going to get that woman? Do you see that instinct, the subconscious? Just recently, they prohibited subliminal advertising in credit card advertisements. It's all to drive the instinct. And so therefore, most of us are just what the Qur'an says. Nay, they're worse than animals. In Surah Baqarah, in the chapter 2 of the Qur'an. That's why Al-Ghazali in his Alchemy of Happiness, he discusses this. He says, you think you know yourself. Because when you're hungry, you eat. When you're angry, you fight. When you're enraged by the passions, you make love. That's not you. You're no different from any other animal. The real you is in your inwardness. Remember I discussed earlier the fitrah, the innate disposition? So we're enslaved to our DNA, social, political, upbringing, parenting, geography, nationality. So we're enslaved. So the question is, how do we free ourselves from this? Well, interestingly, the Arabic word for the soul or the self is ruh. Ruh. And the word ruh shares the same root word as raha. Do you know what raha means? It means like tranquil freedom. So the ruh, the soul, is almost linguistically searching for this tranquil freedom. But it will never attain it. Just like the existential philosophers like Heidegger and Kierkegaard, they said human beings are thrown. There's a concept of thrownness. You're thrown in reality, you have no choice, you're a slave. And the way they tried to get out of the slavery, they realized this. Many of them said the only act of freedom is suicide. That's why Arthur Schopenhauer wrote an essay, it's called On Suicide. David Hume wrote an essay on suicide. Many of them said that the biggest question is, shall we kill ourselves or not? Because that's the only act of freedom. Please don't die after this lecture. I don't want to be responsible for anyone hanging themselves. But the point I'm trying to say is, the existential philosophers, they then said, fine, if everything is meaningless, then that's why Jean-Paul Sartre, he said nothingness, he wrote a book on nothingness, that in this meaninglessness, you create meaning for yourself, and therefore you recreate yourself. But frankly, that is just a self-delusion. It's equivalent of saying, let's pretend to have meaning. Let's pretend to have purpose. But the basis of your existence is zero. So what does Islam say? Well, the 14th century theologian Ibn Qayyim, he made a beautiful point. He said, the only way for the ruh to attain this raha, the soul, the self, to attain this freedom, to break the shackles of your DNA, yourself, social conditioning, the social construct, is just by changing your slavery. To enslave yourself to the divine reality. And once you enslave yourself to the divine reality, you're really no longer a slave to these ephemeral, empty, meaningless shackles. And then you become a human being. Because before, you were just a human doing. And that's why God says in the Qur'an, when you forget God, when you forget Allah, Allah will make you forget your own self. So people, philosophy today, no need for God's existence. Just about thinking about what does it mean to be me. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك إليك. Keep thinking, guys, okay? Assalamu alaikum.
Some people who don't know me, my name's Stuart Jones, and I'm a lecturer in pharmaceutics here at King's College London. And it's my privilege to be here to speak to you tonight, and with Brother Andreas' beautiful talk about thinking about life. And 2 years ago I gave a talk about how I entered Islam. And today there's not time to talk about that. But more importantly, it might be a good opportunity for Muslims and non-Muslims to think about why this person in front of you chose to walk through that open door on December the 7th, 2008, and enter a world which is completely phenomenal. It's something that I could never explain to you, Muslim or non-Muslim. And so, for those Muslims who are maybe struggling, like us all, or those non-Muslims who are thinking about maybe I can follow the same path and walk into something which is truly beautiful, then perhaps you might have some questions. So you can ask yourself or the brother any questions you would like. Now some people might be a bit afraid to ask questions, so you can write them down if you would like to write them down, and we're happy to take your questions. Okay. So we'll open the floor to questions.
Compared to the talks, I want to just draw two parallels to what you seem to be saying here. One is in the Madhyamaka tradition, in Buddhism, everything is empty. And to be consistent, of course, you have to look at this and say, even the notion of emptiness itself is empty. So that's my first part. The second one is in the philosophy of ancient Greeks, where the Pyrrhonian skeptics, having pretty effectively apart what everyone else thought, their positive belief, found that they had to restrain themselves and step back from holding positive beliefs themselves. That the other people's positive beliefs were unsustainable, couldn't be a positive belief of their own. So I get what you're saying about drama and reality, but I mean, if you really buy into this kind of, I've done my social constructivism, I've done my separating out drama from reality, is the only way to avoid simply replacing one drama with another, not to do the same thing, make the same move, and simply stop believing anything at all. I mean, the question is really, having done that, how do you move on to something else?
Well, that's a very, very profound question. First and foremost, I appreciate your sentiments concerning the Buddhist perspective. I actually considered myself quasi-Buddhist before I turned Muslim. I was very interested in the Tibetan tradition. I read the Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead, and really, you can't even call Buddhism a religion, really. It's more like an agnostic philosophy. It's like, look, it works. Forget about where you came from. I think there's a famous statement from the Buddha saying, does God exist? And he's like, well, look, these things work. That's the important thing, yeah? So it's very existential from that perspective as well. So I do appreciate the idea of everything intrinsically is empty, and even the idea of emptiness is empty as well. However, concerning Pyrrhonian skepticism, you're right. They had to move away from any assertions for truth because it was self-defeating, because they basically said, there is no truth. But does that include your statement?
Oh, well, there's no certainty.
Yeah, there's no certainty, or even there is no truth. But that itself, is that a certain statement? If it is, then you have to merely suggest it or keep silent. So that was interesting. So I think what you're trying to say is right, how do you therefore break this cycle? And why does it mean necessarily that religion would actually solve that problem? I totally agree. because religion could be a social construct as well. But there's an axiom in the discussion. And the axiom is that in Islamic spirituality, we believe that the truth is self-evident because of the fact that we have this innate disposition that was created by the truth, Al-Haq, the divine himself. So from that perspective, it breaks all other quasi-truths, yeah? And this has some anthropological justification. For example, if you read the works of Professor Bruce Hood or Olivia Petrovich and Bartlett and others, they will even say, look, if you take children on a desert island, even from an atheist background, and there's no, in other words, there's no construct apart from sand, yeah, they would start to acknowledge the divine reality and that He's one. And that's very interesting. And you even see this cross-culturally. Like China, for example, and Russia, communist Russia, they still have that sanctification instinct. Some psychologists are talking about that we have an instinct to worship. Yeah? I mean, look at Justin Bieber fans. Justin Bieber is starting to follow his own fans now because he was late 40 minutes for a concert. I just heard on the radio, she was like, oh my God, I've been waiting 4 years for him to follow me. And she was like in hysterics, like, oh my God, how shallow, yeah? But the point is we have this, hero worship instinct, right? And we saw massive statues of Stalin and Lenin, and that was like it was like a reverence. They're in awe. It's like almost a sanctification. So there's that axiom. The other thing as well is, the discussion assumes that we already know reality as well. Do you see? And I think you can get to know reality if you reduce it to its very bare components. I'm not a reductionist, by the way. What I mean reduce it by its bare components is, fine, say I'm crying. Now, you could think he's crying because he's sad, or he's happy, or he's mad. But what is the reality of it? Salty water is coming out of his eyes. That's it. And this is, if you translate it into philosophy, it's called epistemic foundationalism. So, epistemic foundationalism. So, epistemic foundation is taking necessarily known truths, that regardless of drama, they're known truths, and building upon them. And I think philosophically, if you start to do that, you would really see the intellectual truthfulness of the Islamic tradition. For example, God exists and the Qur'an is miraculous. I know that's not the topic of today, per se, so we can't get into that type of philosophy, but it opens a window for you to investigate. And really, fundamentally, that all doesn't matter anyway, because at the end of the day, these are just not the ends, the means. Like philosophy and thinking is a means, it's not the ends. Like in the Qur'an, when it tells you to think, it doesn't say that's it, think and that's it. It's actually a journey, it's a means. The verses are teleological, they're there for a specific end. And that end is to acknowledge the truth, which is the divine reality, and that He deserves to be worshipped, and not you, and not others, and not social constructs. So there is a way out somehow, because of the very fact that we believe in the axiom, the fitrah, and of the fact that you could actually know what reality is, and build upon known established truths.
Can I just ask a clarification question?
Yeah, of course.
About foundationalism. So my impression is that there are two...
Well, what's your name, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are two, so my impression is there are two worries about foundationalism. Well, three actually. One is, even if you locate the foundational kinds of belief, there's a worry about how they're foundational, how they're somehow intrinsically knowledge component. Another one is this sort of Quinian worry about sort of semantic holism, right? There could be no foundational beliefs in virtue of the structure of belief.
Yes.
And another one is this, when you think of the whole structure of belief, we can't divide, it makes no sense to divide belief up into individual beliefs and then say they come in the same order. So if this is all resting on a kind of foundationalism, I'm not sure I understand how that works.
It works from the perspective that you could have a veracity for your intellectual basis, yeah? So say you have all these beliefs, right? I believe that I should have a beard, for example, or I should cover my hair, or I should pray 5 times a day, and this is the way to connect with the divine. Yeah, these are all beliefs. Call them fruits of a tree. Foundation is almost going to the roots. And therefore, what we would argue is, if the roots have good reasons, then therefore whatever comes from something that you could call a truth is truth itself. So this is why sometimes we end up in a huge discussion of you know, why do you look like that? Or why do you act this way? Or why do you have this kind of spiritual pathway? Now, if they're all constructs at the end of the day, then the only way to know the validity of that construct is to know its basis. So I would argue, if we can argue healthily, maybe not in an absolute truth way, but in a way that agitates the innate disposition that you know, okay, there's good reasons for this. You have good reasons by foundationally justifying there's a cause for the universe, it makes sense, it's the divine, this Quranic discourse cannot be explained naturalistically. That becomes a foundation that has some kind of strength. And now it might not be absolute truth in a philosophical term, but it has veracity. You know, if you were to break it down, you have to try and build an alternative. You know, it's hard. There's no, what you call a philosophical defeater. If there's no philosophical defeater, then you have good grounds. If it's good grounds, then what comes from it is also true. The alternative is, I would think, almost a fundamentalist type of skepticism, which we should never walk into this building. Because we'll be like, can I trust the foundations of this building? Shall I cross the bridge? Waterloo Bridge, I was driving past it. If we have that kind of Pyrrhonian skepticism, it's like, not only must we remain silent, but we must remain still. And that would be my critique. But I would love to get your email after this, because fascinating questions, thank you.
Okay, we have one question from the sisters. Now, I just want to get clarification of who he is too. So he says, how has Islam changed your life? Which brother was the...
Oh, the Sheikh.
There isn't one possible thing in my life that hasn't changed. So to explain how my life has changed would be quite a complex discourse. When you accept Islam, you enter into another world. And the most difficult thing is looking back on the world you left and trying to understand why you did the previous things that you did. And the brothers provided a nice discourse about reflection. I think this is critical for both Muslims and non-Muslims. When someone accepts Islam and is born again, then they are given that window of opportunity to reflect. And I can sit here today and reflect. And I can think about all the things that have changed. I do struggle to think which thing hasn't changed. And the beauty of Islam that overtakes reverts is relatively pure, usually. This is a great phenomenon of Islam. It's been discussed by the scholars of Islam. And it is unique to the religion in that at the furthest parts from the centre of Islam is the strongest belief in Muslims' hearts. How can this be possible? How can a religion, when you look at other religions, what happens is normally, as it moves away in time and space and geographical context from where it started, it becomes weaker. But in the Muslim experience with Islam, time and time again, the circumference of that religion as it grows is where it's strongest. And so in the people who are accepting Islam, and this is why it's so important for us to give da'wah and be good examples, are where the religion will expand quickest. And so for the non-Muslims becoming Muslims, when they accept Islam, if they accept an Islam that is very pure, their whole lives change. And there shouldn't be anything that stays the same, really. They retain their character, but almost every single thing that they do will be different. But no one will observe this, only the closest people to them. So in response to what has changed, everything.
There's a question, actually two questions direct to Brother Hamza, which is one of them. First one is, how do you know when you've divorced drama from reality? And what if reality isn't enough drama for a 21st society product, aka human being?
Say the second one again.
So what if reality isn't enough drama for a 21st century society product, in brackets human being question? sister company.
What was the first question again? Sorry.
How do we know when you've divorced drama from reality?
Oh, okay, good. I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. Because that would assume that I actually have done it myself. And I haven't. I think you get breakthroughs for small things in your life. For example, whether it's between you and your father, whether it's between you and your mother, you and yourself, you and your work colleagues, you and other human beings. And you have these mini breakthroughs throughout. So I wouldn't say all of a sudden you understand what reality is now. I wouldn't go that far. Because even, for example, you become a Muslim, and you understand reality on a philosophical perspective that yes, God exists, He's one, He deserves to be worshipped, shouldn't worship myself, should do all acts of worship, not for my ego, not for others, but that which transcends that which is the divine pleasure, yeah? So, you may understand that abstractly, but you still may be living in a drama anyway. Do you see? So there is the reality of understanding the reality of the truth of Islam, which is you could find out. But the drama could still be based upon your own perspectives, and you won't be able to deal with the truth that you now have established. Do you see? I'll give you an example. It's the best thing to do is give real human examples. When I became Muslim, my dad was a great guy, thinking, compassionate, loving. He says to me he loves me every day. He said you could move mountains, you could take over the world, God's inside you, yeah? That's the kind of philosophy my dad was talking about. And I had a huge self-esteem, very arrogant, very cocky, nothing's changed. And he was a hero to me. Like, my dad would do some things that, morally, only the first 3 generations of Islam would do. And my dad has done some phenomenally moral acts, yeah? To do like inheritance, giving everything away just to keep his parents together, eating potatoes for a whole week. Yeah, I mean, stuff that is crazy. Being bank robbed just so he could pay people because he used to own a factory. He wouldn't just let them go. He said, look, I have kids too, I wouldn't want their kids to starve. I mean, the kind of things that he's done is phenomenal. And he was my hero. So I become Muslim now and he's not Muslim, so there's a